Hey, you. Yeah, you. Have you ever wanted to play a gacha within a gacha? Yeah, that checks out. Qingque is an RNG heavy quantum DPS who has both the potential of a 5-star and sometimes the value of a 3-star. But whether you're actually interested in her or it's because you don't have Seirei, she's a really fun character to try out and she's a lot more reliable than you might think, unless you're having a bad day. And while her unique mechanics seem a little confusing at first, don't worry, I'm here to explain. Essentially, her characters theme around Mahjong, a Chinese style-based board game. But instead of making whole Mahjong hands, we just need to match 4 tiles out of 3 possible suits to put her in the what's called the Hidden Hand state. Hidden Hand is basically what defines the character, as it buffs her attack stat and turns her basic attack into an AoE nuke. The scaling is based on her basic attack level, and its ratios are higher than almost any other character's skills. The attack itself does a ton of toughness damage, a ton of actual damage, and it gives her a small speed boost thanks to her A6 trace. The only drawbacks to this buff state is that she doesn't get a skill point after attacking, and it's a pain in the ass to get. Think of this as her win condition, as the rest of her abilities all in some way help her achieve this state. Starting with her technique, we use it to draw 2 random tiles at the beginning of the fight. Not the craziest technique, but 2 tiles is a pretty good head start. And no, you can't stack it. Now up next, we have her talent, which draws 1 random tile out of the 3 possible suits during the start of each ally's turn. She can hold up the 4 tiles at once, and if her hand is full when she draws, she'll just replace a tile with the least number of matches. Think of this as her free way of reaching Hidden Hand state, but since the tiles are random, might take you a while to get there. Moving on, let's talk about her skill, which draws 2 random tiles and gives her a fat stacking damage buff, up to 28% level 10 and 38% with her A4 trace. It doesn't give her energy, but as long as you got skill points, you can use it as many times as you want with a freebie once per battle thanks to her A2 trace. As you can imagine, a stacking damage buff can easily make her look like a 5-star character. But since it's all RNG, even if you feed her points for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there's no guarantee that you'll ever match 4. Because of this, the skill ends up giving you more damage the more it stresses you out. But don't worry, if you spend all your SP and whiff, the equip button's right there. But now moving on to the only way we can guarantee her win condition, we have her ultimate, which does quantum damage to every enemy while giving her a matching hand after the attack. It's incredibly useful when your SP is looking kinda low and when you need to guarantee a quick burst of damage. And while its attack scaling is pretty mediocre, there's a good reason, as its real value shows when you use it in conjunction with her skill. It's basically a get out of jail free card whenever you whiff or whenever you don't feel like using any more SP. Comboing with her skill considerably increases the damage of the AoE while salvaging a possibly disastrous turn. Or after matching 4, you can queue up her ultimate during the enhanced attack for a quick bump in damage while guaranteeing a match for her next turn. While it does take away any opportunity to stack your skill, it does mean you can give the SP to somebody else. And as a bonus, if you have Bronya, she can push up Qingque for a combo as she's already loaded up with the nuke. And now that we've gone over all her main abilities, you can kinda see how she normally plays out. You start by building your hand during your allies' turns, you pop your skill in match 4, then you ult to cut the bullshit. Now, while all this might seem like too much of a pain to do, MiHoYo at least had the foresight to design her eidolons to help smooth out the process while also increasing the reward you get from getting lucky. Yep, more RNG. First, we got her E1, which increases her ultimate's damage by 10%. Not much going on with this one, but free damage is free damage. Next, we have her E2, which gives her 1 energy whenever she draws a tile. So she'll get 1 energy once per turn, regardless if she already has 4 of a kind, 2 from her technique, and 2 whenever she uses her skill. Still, not the craziest upgrade, but the free energy does add up. Next, we have her E3, which increases her ultimate and talent levels, which is actually pretty useful, as it increases the attack bonus given by her talent when she's in Hidden Hand state. But now, this is where it gets interesting, as her E4 is a gigantic bump in DPS if you're lucky, as it gives her skill a 24% chance to proc
Autarky,
which gives her a follow-up attack that repeats the attack that you just did. So in other words, if you pop your skill, trigger Autarky in her enhanced state, you'll get 2 buffed up AoE nukes, or Constellation Prize if you're unlucky. Just keep in mind that the follow-up does not get the talent's attack buff, as she already threw her 4 tiles, she doesn't get any bonus energy, and if your initial attack kills the enemy, the follow-up won't come out. Next, we have her E5, which increases her skill in base attack levels, which makes it one of her best eidolons, since that's literally all she does. And finally, we have her best eidolon, which makes it so that her enhanced basic attack gives a skill point back, which really helps with her terrible skill point economy. Now, if you're wondering if you need her eidolons to function, I have to say that it depends on what you want to do. Despite the nature of abilities and the RNG involved, you might be surprised to hear that there's actually 2 ways to play her. If you have the personality of unseasoned chicken and want to play it safe, you can use her as a sub DPS who almost only auto attacks to break and generate SP. Seriously, this is all you're doing. You'll be keeping your skill usage to a minimum and mainly rely on the single draws from her talent and the guarantee from ultimate to get 4 of a kind. And because she's mostly using her basic attack, she helps with the skill point economy and works well with other SP hungry damage dealers, which is something we'll talk about later in the video. The only trade-off is that you won't be enjoying any big damage numbers playing like this, as a majority of her bonuses are locked behind her skill. And while you don't need any eidolons that utilize this style, having E6 is a big upgrade if you want the most out of her. But if you prefer something more spicy, and you're playing a gacha, I know you do, then you need to embrace all the RNG as you play her like a main damage dealer. The idea is to use your teammates to generate as much SP as possible for Qingque to use once her turn comes around to minimize her chances of whiffing. You'll also want to primarily use your ultimate when you do fail to essentially fix your turn. Going for the high damage route will require a lot of careful skill point planning, especially if you're not E6. But if you're looking to cheese your way through MOC or make your own damage showcase video, this is the only way to go. You can use her with other skill point efficient damage dealers, but if you want to use like a hyper carry, I personally don't recommend it until you get at least E4, as the follow-up attack damage is seriously needed. But all jokes aside, she does function very well in both these roles, so you'll honestly be alternating between the two based on the content you're trying to do. And depending on the style you go with, I'm sure you already realize the way you build her does change, but thankfully most of what you can use does stay the same. Overall, the 4-piece Genius set is best for its broken bonuses. Basically, if you're Quantum and you do any sort of damage, you can't beat the 20% defense penetration. But if you don't have any good Quantum pieces, 4-piece Musketeer is solid for the free stats and the basic attack bonus. For the planar set, Inert Salsado is good for the unconditional crit rate and the damage bonuses, especially if you got E4. You can also use Space Sealing Station for the attack bonus if you can hit the speed requirement without too much investment. As for main stats, for the top piece you'll want crit stats, for the sphere get quantum damage, and for the rope get attack. For your boots and relic substats though, this is where it starts to differ, as it depends on what you want her to do and your personal preferences. If she's an SP generating sub DPS, by default go for speed boost, since more speed means more turns, which means more skill points. But if you plan on using her as a main carry, ideally you want her to be last in a rotation to give your teammates a chance to build SP for her. Therefore, I recommend attack boots to maximize your damage for when her turn does come around. However, this gets a little tricky, as being too slow means she gets fewer turns to actually attack. So in my opinion, speed boots are fine as long as the bonus combined with her A6 trace doesn't end up making her faster than her teammates. Though this opinion is real feels crafty because I couldn't find a definite answer to whether attack or speed boots were better. Anyways, in summary, for a basic attack and sub DPS, these are the stats that you need. Try to get a 1-to-2 crit to crit damage ratio and prioritize crit stats, attack, and speed substats. For a main damage dealer build, it's basically the same, but you can go either attack or speed boots based on preference, while prioritizing crit, attack, and break effect for substats. But anyways, for the rest of her build, let's start with her best Lightcone. Before Dawn is undeniably one of the best Lightcones for her and in the game because of its crazy bonuses. Although you can't utilize the skill damage buff if you're E4, the ridiculous follow-up attack bonus more than makes up for it. For an easier to obtain Lightcone though, we have Today is Another Peaceful Day from the Battle Pass, as it gives a 20% damage bonus to Qingque since her ultimate costs 140 energy. At S5, this bonus doubles, but since you only get it once per patch, it's gonna take you a while to get there. And finally, we have the Seriousness of Breakfast, as it's a solid choice for every erudition character. Now, if you don't mind using more conditional Lightcones, Night on the Milky Way and Genius's Repose are also decent on Qingque. But otherwise, I don't recommend any of the other Lightcones as they don't work well on her. And now before we move on to who I recommend the team with her, and I swear this is the last time I'll say this, it depends on what you want her to do. As a sub DPS, she functions really well as a flex pick on teams with carries that want to spam their skill as often as possible. Characters like Dan Heng, Yan Qing, and even Hook for instance can freely spam their skills on the boss, while Qingque generates a ton of SP for them. While a traditional support may be a better pick than her in some content, when a boss summons a ton of quantum weak mobs, she does a great job of clearing them when it would normally be too much to handle for a single damage dealer. But if you plan on using her as a main DPS, you can run her as a solo carry or with other skill point efficient damage dealers like Himeko, whose damage mainly comes to her follow-up attack, or Clara, who does most of her damage through a counter and can act as an aggro drawing tank, or Arlen, who uses HP rather than his skill points to attack. And for my personal favorite, E1 Sushang works incredibly well as her skill refunds the cost whenever she uses it on a weakness broken enemy. But from then on, you just pick your favorite defensive support of choice, and then the rest of your teammates are the usual skill point efficient suspects. Ting Yuin is one of my favorites as she's especially good for attack buff, skill point efficiency, and for her ultimate, which gives Qingque much needed energy. Bronya is also a good choice as a combo tool and an SP generator as long as you only use her skill in key moments. You focus on using her basic attack and save your skill for when Qingque uses her skill plus ult combo for a big burst in damage. Pela and Silverwolf are also incredibly strong picks as their defense shreds are great for balancing out the numerous attack and damage buffs that Qingque's kit already gives. And finally, my personal favorite if you got Eidolons is Asta, whose talent is especially strong if you're running 2 damage dealers and can give the whole team a speed buff without messing up the team's rotation. And speaking of Asta, if you want to learn how to play and build her too, you should check out the video link on the screen now. But otherwise, that's it for Qingque. I'll see you in the next one.